restructuring of the education system so that we get 20 kids a class instead of 40, a proper SME type EDB that's worth its name. These are the things cost big bucks. These are the things that you cannot do in 1 year. Healthcare system, for example, education system, for example, infrastructure system, for example. You have to plan from year 1 to year 10. Year 1, I will do this. Year 2, I will do this. Year 3, I will do that. Year 4, I will do this. Year 5, I will review. Year 6, I will do this. Year 7, and so forth. And I can only spend so much here because I have to spend on that as well. I have to prioritize this huge long-term fiscal policy. So our macro management is our fiscal policy. Ministry of Finance geared up to do this kind of long-range fiscal planning because it is not just run-of-the-mill fiscal policy. It is investment steadily and in a planned way in national infrastructure, social and physical. If done properly, recreate a true social democracy. We will be reclaiming our roots. Are we set up to do this? My answer is sadly, no. Indigit is familiar with the fiscal policy system. Is the MOF set up to do anything remotely like this? We need to do this line, and this line involves a pleading of demand, which needs to be filled in every year.
Yeah, but in the event that we cannot do it?
In the event we cannot do it, we will be gravitating towards this line. So what's going to happen? We're going to end up we're going to end up in an unlivable city.
No, you see, this one here, if I may suggest, will take the political will by the ruling party to say that this is our long-term vision in ensuring that we continue to be in power for the benefit of all. And in order to do that, we cannot do our budget every 4 years. We have to do our budget every 4 plus 8. And this is the investment we have to make. And they cannot put it in such a way that the surpluses are accessible for me, and like Taman having changed the contribution around 12 to bring 50% of back to alleviate GST increases, 2016 to give handout at the beginning of this year to 800,000 people, and 20th February he's going to do it again.
Yeah.
He's going to put 4.6 billion into the industry mapping program.
Correct.
But this industry mapping program, it might suggest, does not give the long-term restructuring of it, right?
None of it is that.
It will be led by those people in the committee that will...
Essentially, they're playing marbles. They're playing guli-guli when they should be in a serious long-term game that will reclaim their mantle as true social democrats.
No, and they have to do that.
You know when that was last done? That was last done in 1965.
Yeah, but that's such a long time ago.
Okay, that's what they did, right? That's how they built this country.
They stopped doing it because they need to win the next election.
But
so no, I agree with you. But I'm saying that the policies have been driven mainly by that process right now.
Short-term process.
Very short-term.
But they need to get grab the bull by the horn to say we cannot have only one bullfight. We have to build a new bull ring.
This is what the origin. Yeah, I know it's nostalgia being hot, and I know it's damn difficult to happen. But this is what the original cabinet was about. This was the kind of stuff that Goh Keng Swee would have orchestrated, right?
But Lam Keong, I mean, don't they see that there is no future if we just play with that with the blue line, with the green line, and all that?
They see it, but they are going to be gone by here. It's somebody else's problem after this.
To finance a minimum universal income. Forget about wage, just talk about minimum financial income, right? The government basically pegged income minimum to at $2,500 a month. There are about 100,000 households in Singapore, including single-person households, who lives under that. To bring 100,000 households to $2,500 a month, it's not going to cost. It's not going to break Singapore's budget.
That's right.
Okay, so it can be done. It can be done at one fell swoop. It doesn't need 10 years.
No,
it can be done.
It's not being done because it's entirely ideologically unable to think.
Okay, it can be done next month.
Exactly.
I agree with you. If they're only going to give out cans of sardines, you will survive on it. What I'm trying to say is you're going to find a fishery in the seas and go to Mexico.
Yeah, but that is the kind of argument they keep saying, you got to teach people need to work in order to survive. Bullshit. Just give them the money. They don't have it.
Yeah.
All right?
So we're talking about separate things. I'll talk about it later.
And then the consumption will expand.
Yeah, that's right. So we're talking about two things. One is social protection. Beng is talking about basic social protection. And he's absolutely right. We can bloody well afford it.
Yes.
It's not a big deal. You don't require a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
You know, you require just a good sociologist. And we can afford it many, many times over.
Exactly.
The reason we don't do it is an ideological problem. They have hang up in their mental outlook about welfare.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
So-
no problem.
And
That's-
if you think the amount of energy that is saved with all the voluntary welfare association that goes into
Absolutely.
this piecemeal activities
Absolutely.
and the wages that goes into it, you can deduct a whole chunk of money from the minimum income necessity.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, one thing is absolutely right. We are relying on VWOs to solve our poverty problem when they are not resourced to do so. Solving poverty is a public good like building roads. You think VWOs can build roads, enough roads in Singapore? You're sadly mistaken. The government in alleviating poverty, even though it's not huge, has to do the heavy lifting.
Basically.
After that, the VWs can come in and top up very important work. Humanizing the spending, right? Giving dignity, not just bread. That should be the real role of NGOs, but the NGOs now are bogged down
Raising funds.
raising funds to give enough dialysis to our people. Since when is dialysis an NGO activity? It's a public good, okay? Just like a road. Yeah.
Actually, the total amount that is given up to VWOs is the money that the community chest collects. And the money that the community chest collects is only about 50 million a year. 50 million spread out to 125 VWOs. Actually, that's completely absurd. It's completely absurd. 50 million in a budget of what? How many billion? 6-7 billion, right?
$68 billion
Yeah,
for
they're
last year.
70, I think.
$70 billion.
70 billion, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. We are giving social protection peanuts. Peanuts.
Peanuts is the skin of the peanut.
We are giving social protection the skin of a peanut when the problem facing us is this problem.
Yeah.
The problem facing us is we are on our way to a Trumpian solution. If you neglect social protection long enough, the people are going to rise up, you know, in some form or another, and you will not like the form that it takes. Okay? We need the proper supply side as well as the long-term demand side management, which is the combination of monetary and fiscal policy. And the fiscal policy is a huge challenge because it cannot be just a few years. It has to cover 5, 7, 10 years. And the only way we can do that sanely is if we can implement and plan, for God's sake, plan a long-term program. But let me tell you, the fiscal resources are enormous.
Yes.
We can just afford it with a little bit of rise in tax, okay, if you add it up. But right now, the cabinet, nobody is discussing this. The cabinet itself is not very clear, except for a handful of people, what are fiscal resources in the long term. Right? This is secret information, I can't talk about it. Okay.
I can talk about it.
Okay. We can talk about it conceptually.
That's why
But let me tell you that it's enough, okay? It's enough. And we're in a few countries in the world
More than enough.
where it is enough. We are one of the lucky bastard countries in the world where it is actually close to being enough. And yet, we're one of the few countries that don't do it. This is the irony of the political economy, all right? So the last thing I want to say is that we need to spend that in these 6 key areas: housing, education, healthcare, infrastructure, environment, population, immigration, and safety net, right? If you look at these areas, these 6 key areas, they will absorb this 10-year plan very fruitfully. And if you look at these 6 areas, these are public goods. The market cannot produce them. Think to yourself, these are the 6 areas that form the essence of the Singapore dream.
That's right.
Doesn't every household want this for their children to remain Singapore citizens? And this is the core spending we are neglecting. We neglected even to plan, even when we have to for growth. Okay, so I just want to end here by saying this is where we came from, right? 70, 65, 72, FDI, blah, 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 blah. But during that period, it can be characterized as it was by Rajaratnam as a socialism that works. Then,
7 IS characterization, not a
That's the book.
okay, Davana, sorry. Stand corrected, thank you. Then for the next 20 years, we lost our way into the neoliberal fog, and all the bureaucrats just dropped their hands and left it to the market. Even our housing policy, right, became market pegged. Our medical policy, right, the bottom 20% couldn't afford it until the last move for MediShield Life, and we still don't have elderly care. We're still missing in action. The transportation system became a public company, for God's sake, and we haven't rectified that basic problem, right? The school system became effectively privatized. There's a $2 billion, private tuition market that if you don't take, you can forget about doing as well as you need to do. Okay, so we left everything, all those 6 things, all those 6 keys, we left it to the market at our peril. We neglected it for 20 years. Now we are called on to either recognize that we need to do something about it for the next 20 years, 10 years at least, or we will lose our way. So I would say that was the capitalism that didn't work. We thought the free market would work. And now we're into what I call a call to go back to a social democracy that hopefully works. We have moved in that. We have begun to move in that direction. We have, to be fair, we have begun to move in that direction ever since 2011, right?
Inclusive growth.
Yes.
I mean, those kind of-
Inclusive
And
growth.
Actually, the healthcare expenditure has gone up.
Yes.
Since 2000, it went from about $2 billion to $11 billion.
Exactly.
I mean,
So now we have universal hospital care. We did not. We just had it last November, I believe. Yeah, we had the Pioneer Package. Now we actually depegged quietly HDB prices from BTO prices or market prices.
The market factor. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're backtracking on that, right? We have begun to invest more in schools, but as usual, we're doing it at an incredibly slow and incremental rate, not at the rate that the situation demands. Certainly, I mean, Goking sees all this already. He attacked everybody, I think. Okay, so we need to go back to a social democracy that hopefully works. And so this is where we are at. If you want to talk about the future of the Singapore economy, these are the trends I see. I think I'll stop the presentation here.
Given all this, then where do we go? Given the fact that the global economy as such is also tanking, because the rich have got too rich globally, and the rest are not rich enough, so that the aggregate demand globally has dropped.
Yes.
Right, not only locally. That as the backdrop, what do we do? What is your view about universal basic income? I did a rough calculation, and this is just taking the amount of land that has been built on in Singapore. I did a rough calculation on land costs. The land that has not been built on has a value but not yet extracted, okay? So it's empty. The land that has been built on, the total value is $2.5 trillion. If you were to invest that in some way, and I think in some way it's already being invested, you should get a return of 2% per year, at least. That boils down to $50 billion a year. That is the extent to which you can create your social democracy.
Okay, Keng Su, this is the point I was going to ask about the estate of the state.
That is the estate.
No, the estate of the state is, as you well know, our returns to IMF and the returns to country on net investment income. Last recorded 2015 is $10 billion difference. Okay, so if you move it back 50 years and ask since the beginning or since 65, how many of the townships that were built that had to be paid to the property assessors, to the successor, the SLA and all that, that is the imputation of the proceeds.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you need to get a payback in order to level all these things. Then there's a second and more insidious problem, is there's left a hanging debit in the economy, and that drives everything up. Every time you pay, HDB pays SLA for Tekong, Bidadari, all that, they have to pay a current market price.
Yes.
So once you do that, everything else goes up.
Yeah, okay, so can I talk a bit about the estate of the state? Okay. In a way that does not compromise the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's to understand it for laymen, here's I think one simple way of thinking about it. The estate of the state that we're talking about is our fiscal resources.
Yep.
The estate of fiscal resources comprises two parts. a flow and a stock. The flow is annual budget surplus or deficit. It's the taxes of the state net of its expenditures. So this is the flow of our fiscal resources. The stock of our fiscal resources comprises our official reserves, largely foreign, a little bit local, but largely in GIC and Temasek to some lower extent. And although this is huge, the real huge iceberg below this is the real estate of the state, literally, which is the fact that the Singapore government owns like 80% of the land. Now, this land reform enacted in the early years of government, most of it punitive prices to rich and poor
Skin
alike.
of the peanut prices.
Yeah, to rich and poor alike, right? And they bought from both, farmer and tauke at the same rate. This land reform has resulted in the biggest land bank most countries have outside of communist China. This is actually part of the state of state, and it's probably bigger at current market, provided Singapore's economy goes on and is prosperous. Probably much larger than the financial reserves, and in turn, this has implications to the flow of how much we get each year. Now, the IMF calculates that every year we've been running a 7% of GDP surplus. They've been calculating that we have 20 to $25 billion a year more than the government says they're willing to use for the budget, because we calculate that flow very conservatively. We leave out the proceeds from the land sales. Okay, and when questioned about this in the last elections, I think our Deputy Prime Minister defended this policy, and he said that this real estate is the property of the state. If we were to monetize it, we are encouraging people to spend the assets of the state recklessly for fiscal populism. So we will always account it, we'll never account it as part of the flow. We will only account the investment income from it as part of the flow, which is part of that net income investment.
But it skews the net income return computation.
What the problem with this calculation is the government sells the land, yes, private hands, yes. Most of it is 100 the lease.
99 years.
In 100 years' time, the government gets back everything.
Some are not even 99 years.
No,
Some
No,
are
but
60 years. So they get back most of the value of
No,
it.
but you see, the people who opt for the selective en bloc redevelopment scheme actually loses out the number of years that they paid up to the time of repossession.
Not true. They get the zero. They get the new flat starting year zero.
No, they get they get starting at rate zero, diluted at 40 stories compared to 9 stories. They get 30,000.
The IMF calculation, if you think about it, if you get most of your land back in 100 years, you should be able to spend 100th of your land sales discounted to the present value, because that is free money. So we do not include this. So this is about 5% of GDP every year. So although the state tells us we run a deficit, we've actually got 5% of GDP more than what they fess up to, what they're willing to spend. In order to spend the program that we thought of just now, you have to begin to use this. You have to begin to use the real structural surplus, 5 to 7% of GDP, probably 5 if you want to be conservative, that the IMF, and don't think the IMF is a slouch when it comes to calculating budget surpluses, right? We have to move towards IMF convention, use the money that was there. So in essence, we've come to a point, we've dug ourselves into a hole, to dig ourselves out of the hole. We have to begin to use the reserves, the estate of the state, in a intelligent and sustainable way. Okay? And so you can use 5%, another 5% of GDP, and it's not going to bring it back. In fact, 50, 100 years time, you get everything back. The budget will still be in balance or in surplus if you don't exceed 5% of GDP. And that's just from land sales. What about how you calculate the investment income? We haven't gone into that.